All right, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. I'd like to call this meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. As a reminder, this meeting is being shared virtually through Zoom for those who couldn't join us in person today, and it's being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn on your microphones before speaking so that those online in the room can hear you, and also state your name as well, as it's helpful for those that are joining us virtually. I'd like to ask the committee members at the table to introduce themselves. I'll start. I am Kevin Carrier, representing Lake County.
Tara Orban, representing Cook County.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Heidi Lichtenberger, representing King County.
John Loper, representing DuPage.
Christina Kupkowski, Will County.
Scott Hennings, McHenry County.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA.
John Paul Diepla, FHWA.
Hugo Coronado, MPC.
George representing Kendall County.
Eric Llewellyn representing Pace.
Jack Cruikshank, Illinois EPA.
Good morning, Leon Rockingham, Mayor of the City of North Chicago, serving the Council of Mayors.
Karen Robles, Illinois Tollway.
Jeff Driver, CDOT.
Katie Hurtis, District 1, IDOT, Program Development.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT Planning and Programming.
David Kralik, Metro.
Vicki Barrett, CMAP.
Jennifer Henry, CTA.
All right, thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 2, agenda changes and announcements. We do not have any agenda changes today. Do I have any announcements from committee members? All right, seeing none, moving on to item 3.01, which is approval of the minutes. So we have before us draft minutes from our April 25th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
So move, Mayor Rockingham.
Motion, Mayor. A second?
Second, DuPage.
DuPage, second. Is there any discussion on the minutes as proposed? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 4 is CMAP update. Amy Lee. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. As you can see in your agenda, we have quite a few approval items, so I'm going to keep my updates pretty light today. I just want to bring everyone's awareness to 2 funding opportunities. IDOT local transportation grants are now available. A reminder, Governor Pritzker and IDOT have announced $400 million in state funding for local transportation projects aimed at improving mobility and quality of life across Illinois. Those applications are due by this Monday, June 1st. So just wanted to flag that for you all. The other funding opportunity is the Illinois Highway Safety Improvement Program. This is another program currently accepting applications. This is for fiscal year 2027. The application process will close June 20th. So again, just keeping things light here for today, given how much we have to cover. A friendly reminder, now that summer's underway, construction's active, we will next be meeting in August, so August 1. Okay, with that, I'll turn things back over to Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Moving right along to item 5.01. Russell is here this morning. He's going to provide us an overview of the federal fiscal year 2025 FTA sub-area partial allocation between Illinois and our neighboring states here in the region. Good morning, Russell.
All right, good morning. You guys going to have me for the first few items here. So let's see if we can get through this somewhat quickly. At the last Transportation Committee meeting, I asked you to recommend approval to the MPO Policy Committee of partial suballocations of FTA Section 5307/5340, 5337, 5339, and 5310 for the region. At that time, I stated if FTA released the full apportionments, we would be back to make that request, which is what we're doing at this time. As stated in the memo included in your packet on May 5th, the full apportionments were released by FTA. The proposed suballocations between Illinois, Indiana, and Illinois and Wisconsin, as well as the suballocations within the RTA region for each service board, have been included in your packet. Typically, the Transportation Committee and the MPO would be asked to take action on the suballocations after the RTA board had approved them. However, due to the timing of the release of the apportionments, the Transportation Committee and the MPO will be asked to take action prior to the RTA board. which is why at this time I'm asking the Transportation Committee to recommend to the MPO Policy Committee endorsement of the sub-allocations contingent on RTA board approval at their June 12th board meeting. So after a motion, I can take any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Russell. Yeah, before discussion here, I will entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of the TIP conformity analysis and amendment 25-08.
This is
Whoop.
the FTA.
I skipped that. Where am I
Sub-allocation.
at here?
I know you want me to be done fast, but that's the.
All right, I will rewind on that one. So it is, where am I at here? I got screwed up there. All right, I jumped ahead there. So I will entertain a motion to approve recommending the fiscal year 25 FTA sub-area allocation to the MPO Policy Committee for their consideration. Do I have a motion? So moved. Got Jack with the motion. Second. Awesome, Ida. All right, any questions or discussion today for Russell? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Russell's sticking with us for item 5.02. He's going to provide an overview of the fiscal year 2023 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program amendments.
Okay, included in your packet today are the 26 formal tip changes shown on Amendment 25-07 and the 137 tip changes shown on Administrative Amendments 25-07.1 and 25-07.2. Formal amendments resulted in an increase of $113.8 million in total project costs for our prior, current, and future years. I'm going to give a few highlights. IDOT is continuing to add more funds to the I-80 project. It's different phases of that project continue to get closer to letting and costs get more finalized. In this round, they've added a few more dollars to the I-80 bridge. They are also adding $41 million to the Illinois 31 project in McHenry County. That is a regionally significant project, RSP number 6, so one of our first ones. And that one is also getting closer to going to a letting. As safety targets are being mentioned later on today, we are seeing more roundabouts being built in the region. And Oswego is getting $8 million in addition to what they already have to build a roundabout. And Metra has added $16.5 million to install bidirectional signals on the Metra Electric and South Shore line between 47th Street and 65th Street. So those are some of the highlights in this round of tip changes. Administrative amendments added $52.7 million to the tip in prior, current, and future years. The net change for total costs in the tip from all amendments resulted in $166.5 million being added to the tip in prior, current, and future years. Cost changes and new projects comprise most of the formal changes, while administrative amendments were primarily, as they always are, AC and ACC changes and cost changes. Accounting for the amendments presented to you today, the tip remains physically constrained. The tip amendments were posted on May 23rd for committee and public review. Approval of formal tip amendment 25-07 is requested, and after the motion has been made, I can answer any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Russell. I will entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 25-07. Thank you, Scott. Do I have a second? Thank you, Christina. All those in favor, or actually any discussion or questions from anyone? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 5.03, Russell will provide an overview of the On to 2050 Transportation Improvement Program conformity analysis for approval.
All right, now we're there. Included in your packet today is the On to 2050 2024 to 2028 tip conformity amendment 25-08. The CMAP region, as you may know, is a non-attainment area for ozone. Thus, we are required under the Clean Air Act to demonstrate that projects in the tip conform to the motor vehicle emissions budget for our area through a regional emissions analysis. Specifically, projects in the tip subject to air quality analysis requirements demonstrate when modeled that the region does not exceed our motor vehicle emissions budget as shown at the end of the memo in your packet. Typically, the formal conformity amendment, which is what is on the agenda today, is the only conformity amendment. However, as stated in the conformity memo, CMAP has also created an administrative conformity amendment, 25-08.1, to enable projects to make technical corrections or update modeling information for exempt tested projects, which are projects that are exempt from conformity requirements, but are doing things such as changing lane widths that we might want to capture in our travel demand model. We like to capture this information in the TIP and then have it fed into our travel demand model network to help keep the network up to date. By adding the administrative amendment, we can capture this information in a more timely fashion. The conformity amendment was released for a 30-day public comment period, during which we received no comments. The conformity amendment, CMAP's emissions modeling process, and the regulatory requirements associated with conformity were discussed at a Tier 2 interagency consultation meeting on May 16th, at which time nobody objected to anything that CMAP was doing and everybody was supportive of our modeling process. At this time, CMAP staff requests approval recommending the ONTO 2050, 2023 to 2028 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 25-08 to the MPO Policy Committee. And after the motion is made, I can answer any questions if there are any.
All right, and real quick, just for the record, I just want to acknowledge that Mark Kane from the FTA has joined the meeting in person today. So good morning, Mark. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve TIP conformity analysis and amendment 25-08. Jack, do I have a second? Second. Thank you very much. Any questions or discussion items for Russell? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Russell. All right. Moving on to item 5.04. Doug is with us this morning to provide an overview of the 2026 through 2030 CMAQ, STP Shared Fund, and TAP-L programs for approval. Good morning, Doug.
Morning. Today I have for you the federal fiscal year 2026 to 2030 Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, STP Shared Fund, and Local Transportation Alternatives programs for your consideration. As noted in the memo in your packet, the respective project selection committees have approved these programming funds for regional transportation investments. These programs include a total of 40 projects that were selected from 88 applications received in response to our joint call for projects issued in October of last year. You may notice that the funding does not include the Carbon Reduction Program funding, or CRP. In the last funding cycle, the CRP funds were programmed out to federal fiscal year 2028, but the current federal transportation bill only extends to 2026. Due to the unknown future or status of the CRP funding, staff did not recommend funding any additional projects with CRP funding. Staff has also set aside CMAQ funding in 2030 to help cover the $60 million in CRP program or CRP funding currently programmed in 2027 and 2028. So the recommended programs were available for public comment from April 4th through May 2nd, and 4 public comments were received. 3 of the comments were submitted in support of a project included in the TAP-L program, and 1 comment requested the addition of 5 projects that did not submit that were not submitted by an eligible sponsor during the call for projects. So based on the nature of these comments, the project selection committees agreed not to make any changes to the draft programs. The programs have been incorporated into formal TIP amendments 25-09.1, point 2, and point 3 as recommended by the CMAQ and TAP Project Selection Committee and the STP Project Selection Committee. At this time, staff requests approval to recommend the TIP amendments to the MPO Policy Committee for their consideration at their June meeting.
All right, I will entertain a motion to approve a recommendation of the formal TIP amendments 25-09.1, 25-09.2, and 25-09.3 to the MPO Policy Committee for their consideration.
So moved. David Kralik.
Thank you, Dave. We got a motion, second? All right, any questions for Doug? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Doug. All right. Moving on to item 5.05, Martin will tell us about the MPO self-certification for Metropolitan Transportation Planning Process for recommendation to the MPO Policy Committee. Good morning,
Morning.
Martin.
Federal statute requires 2 certifications of the planning process every 4 years, self-certification and federal certification. Self-certification is a bit of an internal audit of the regional planning process to make sure we align with federal planning requirements. Federal certification will come in early 2026, where essentially our federal partners will come check our work. Statute for self-certification has 10 parts detailed in your packet. A few of the highlights. Part 1 is the metropolitan planning requirements. This is all of the core MPO requirements, such as developing a long-range plan, a congestion management process, and the TIP. Part 2 references the Clean Air Act. We just voted on conformity, is one area where that applies to us. And then parts 3 through 10 really cover a variety of different civil rights rules and regulations, such as Americans with Disability Act, Title VI, and Older American Act, that these prohibit discrimination on race, color, national origin, ability, sex, and others. These show up in a variety of ways through our work. Procurement and HR obviously deal with these. Any Title VI analysis we undertake, and all of the ADA work that CMAP and you take on. Staff have been meeting the past few months to review these rules. We found that the planning process is in compliance, but that all documents were not easy to locate on our website. We worked with our communications teams to find homes for the documents that weren't easily available, and they're now all available for you today. With that, I'll take any questions about the self-certification.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I will entertain a motion to recommend the MPO, MPO self-certification for transportation planning for MPO Policy Committee approval. We have a motion. Jack, thank you. Any second? Mayor? Someone else get it? Second? Oh, yeah, Kyle. There we go. All right. Any questions for Martin? Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Brandon Gaber, IDOT. We've communicated offline on this topic. Just wanted to make a note that this action is taken again when your TIP is updated, I think next fall. The federal CFR recommends that, says that this should be done with the adoption of a TIP document. Certainly, we want to make sure that you're meeting the 4-year benchmark on this, but just to note that hopefully this will be done again in a year and a little over a year.
Yeah, thanks. Like you said, we wanted to make sure that we don't come out of compliance since it's been 4 years since we last did this, but we'll again align it with our TIP adoption in the fall.
Great, that makes sense. Any other comments or questions for Martin? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Martin. All right. Moving on to item 5.06. Lindsay is here to share some highlights from the 6 recently completed safety action plans for counties of Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, and Will. She'll be asking the committee to recommend the plans for adoption by the MPO Policy Committee. The MPO Policy Committee, just as a reminder, is convening this morning at 11:30 a.m. for a special meeting for approval. So good morning, Lindsay.
Thank you, Kevin. So thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited to present these safety action plans. While we did take a slightly unexpected turn at the beginning of this year, I am very proud of how far each of the counties have come and the consultant teams and the work that they have done. And next slide. I'm going to start with why we're doing this work, a quick reminder, and then I'm going to share some of the highlights from each county plan, and then we'll talk about the approval process of these technical plans and what is next, and we should have some time for questions at the end. Before I jump into those highlights, I wanted to emphasize why we are embarking on this safety work. In 2014, about 400 people in the region lost their lives to traffic crashes. Just 7 years later, it was over 700. With the increase in vehicle size changing the kinetic energy in crashes, with more distractions inside our vehicles than ever before, our region, and this transportation committee in particular, said we had to do something. We had to take a more active role in safety. Our traditional approach, which was, well, if everyone just followed the rules of the road, nobody would die, wasn't working. And I think the fact that human behavior is something we can't control, it can feel like there's not much that can be done. And we were not alone in our region of seeing this increase in traffic fatalities. And so the federal government created a new holistic take on roadway safety called the Safe System Approach. This approach seeks to reduce the severity of crashes using a redundancy of safety measures that anticipate those human mistakes and behaviors to create an environment where making a mistake won't result in death and serious injury. So these layers of safety consider safer speeds, safer roadway design, safer vehicle design, and the safety of people inside and outside of vehicles, as well as our response to crashes. I also want to take a moment to recognize that you won't hear me say car accident. And just as we don't say there was an airplane accident, we shouldn't define traffic crashes as accidents. When we use the word accident rather than crash, we are implying that that collision was somehow inevitable. We're absolving the person driving of their responsibility operating heavy machinery and others whose role in safety might not be so obvious. And that doesn't align with the safe system approach and the goal of making our streets safer for everyone. So the words that we use matter, and I really appreciate the effort of our county partners of making that shift from accident to crash, because it's important that we catch ourselves when we use language that doesn't quite represent our goals. So now on to the more exciting parts. While each of these county plans followed our regional framework for developing a safety action plan, and they meet the federal requirements, they were put together by different consultant teams. They have different visuals, and I wanted to go through and pull some highlights from each of the plans and some of the takeaways that our team found interesting and to show the high injury networks for each county. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that while these plans cover the entire county, they are not just the responsibility of the counties. These cover all of the roadways in the counties and will require coordination and collaboration at every level across jurisdictions with IDOT, with the local municipalities. All right, now into Cook County. Between 2018 and 2022, they found that traffic fatalities had increased by more than 50%. And while people outside of cars were made up only 3% of total crashes, they represented a quarter of the fatal and serious injury crashes. Turning and angle crashes were the most frequent type for those serious injury and fatal crashes. And I do want to emphasize that when we studied all of the crashes in the region, we are very focused on fatal and serious injury crashes because those are the ones we want to eliminate. We know people are still going to have their fender benders, but if we can keep people alive and get them to walk away, that's our goal. And aggressive driving was the primary cause of crashes, contributing to 60% of fatalities and serious injuries. Next. The high injury network for Cook County is available in a web map so that communities can assess their roadways to make improvements. And I've pulled together a few screenshots to show here. It says it's the combined performance metric. So that is looking at both the rate and the frequency of serious and fatal crashes in Cook County. We can go to the next slide. Just showing like the middle of the county, and the blue layer below the roads is the US DOT designated areas of persistent poverty. We can go to the third one, and that's South Cook. And these roadways represent 5% of the overall system, and 35% of fatalities and serious injuries occur on these roads. And now on to DuPage. So I thought that Cook had a lot of aggressive driving, but in DuPage, they found that 71% of severe crashes involved aggressive driving behaviors. And in 85% of the fatal and serious injury crashes, they identified speeding and intersections, older drivers, or people walking and biking as were involved in one of those emphasis areas. And while arterial streets comprise only 13% of the streets in DuPage County, they make up 58% of our severe crashes. DuPage County had a survey that they sent out. Oh, we got to close the chat there so you can see what the answers were. They were asking people in the county what their major barriers to walking and biking were, and the top 3 answers were concerns around traffic safety, lack of sidewalks or safe crossings, and a lack of bike facilities. And this map shows DuPage's high injury network. And interestingly, their top 10 corridors did not include any highways because the serious crash rate per mile was not high enough. But it does have significant portions of Illinois 83, Illinois 56, and Illinois 38. And the dots represent the high injury network intersections. Okay, and now on to Kane County. Their analysis found that the top 3 emphasis areas for fatal and serious injury crashes were intersection, speeding, and roadway departure. Roadway departure crashes, unsurprisingly, are twice as common in unincorporated areas as municipalities where we saw more of the intersection crashes. The roadways with the highest relative risk are those non-freeway arterials with 4 or more lanes, a speed limit of 30 or less, and with anywhere from more than 2,000 vehicles a day to above 20,000 vehicles per day. I thought it was interesting that the team looked at the top 3 emphasis areas for every municipality in the county. I just did a screenshot of the top 7 so you could read it on the slide. As you can see, the intersection crashes and speeding are the most frequently listed. Next. The high injury network for Kane County shows roads that have 5 or more serious injury or fatal crashes per mile, with those red lines having 11 or more per mile. These roads make up 10.4% of the network in Kane County and account for 77.8% of fatal and serious injury crashes. Next. In McHenry County, they looked at the emphasis areas where there is an overrepresentation of fatal and serious injury crashes and found that for pedestrian, motorcycle, impaired driving, bicyclists, wrong way, unrestrained, and roadway departure, they had more than double the share of fatal and serious injuries as they did total crashes. So for example, the impaired driving made up only 5% of total crashes, but 25% of fatal and serious injury crashes. And I think we're really focusing on where these disparities are. And I wanted to congratulate McHenry on recently adopting a Vision Zero policy earlier this month, just 10 days ago, actually. In McHenry County, this is their high injury network. They found that major collector roads have the highest fatal and serious injury crash rate per vehicle mile traveled, while interstates have the lowest. Their principal arterials have the highest crash rate per mile. And these 9% of roads in the county make up 65% of fatal and serious injury crashes. In McHenry, they did a pretty neat engagement event with a AP Human Geography and Statistics class to identify traffic safety risks around Cary Grove High School, to hear the students' concerns as well as get ideas on solutions. The students conducted over 300 surveys and did traffic counts, data analysis, and they provided recommendations, which included buffered bike lanes, no turn on red at key intersections, and automated speed enforcement in the school zone. And Will County, last but not least, the consultants found that roads with speed limits above 35 miles per hour account for 20% of the roads, but 43% of fatal and serious injury crashes. They found that the fatal and serious injury crashes are overrepresented in those areas of persistent poverty. And they also should be congratulated for adopting a Vision Zero resolution on May 15th. Next. In the analysis for Will, they found that while people walking and biking account for just over 5% of overall trips, they make up a quarter of the fatal and serious injury crashes. They also shared the relative risk for different modes of transportation, with riding a motorcycle being the most dangerous. Next. And this map is our last high injury network map. In Will County, the 6% of the network, 6.3% of the network covers over 68% of fatal and serious injury crashes. These severe crashes are 11 times more likely to occur on these roadways. I did want to take a moment to thank the consultants, because none of this would have been possible to complete in such a short time frame when we had to change course. We had 7 consultant teams working with us to get to the finish line with these strong technical plans that will enable municipalities and counties to have a qualifying safety action plan to apply for future funding. Next. And while we hope that these get adopted today, that doesn't mean our safety work is done. We will continue to embark on many safety projects, including we created a new program area that Vicki is heading up called the Safe Systems Program Area, and that will advance systemic changes that we need to realize our 2050 goal of 0 fatalities. This will include convening state and regional partners to prioritize many of the initiatives that are listed in these county plans, including context-based solutions, policies, and how to advance the traffic safety culture. We also had a lot of elements within our original scopes that we weren't able to complete in time to develop these plans. So we'd like to get back on many of those tasks, and there's a lot more planned. So these were finalized last Friday, and I'm sure everybody read the thousands of pages that we sent to you. And now we are asking for you to approve the recommendation to the MPO Policy Committee for adoption. And I guess, next slide. Questions?
Thank you, Lindsay. Before we have any discussion or comments, we'll entertain a motion to get this item on the floor. So I will entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of the Safe Streets for All Regional Safety Action Plans for MPO Policy Committee approval. We have a motion. Jack, we have a second. Tara. All right. Any questions, discussion?
Yes, sir.
Anything for Lindsay? Yeah, Jack.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate this. My question was about, like, what do you foresee as the next steps after this, right? We have all these great stats. How can this committee work with those statistics to integrate those into our larger planning goals?
That's a great question. And I think that we are, putting our heads together about how we can go through each of these plans, see where we have common elements coming up, because there are a lot, and what we can work on as far as policies, working with our partners, and also see about getting some implementation funding to get projects built. There is an opportunity for many of the quick build projects that could be put in place pretty soon, and we've seen a lot of those around the region, not just in Chicago. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, and I think Vicki has also been thinking about that, and many of our partners.
Thank you.
Great. Kyle.
Yeah, I really want to commend you and Vicky and the whole team and the counties and the consultants. I think, as far as I know, this is the most comprehensive look we've ever had at this issue. And it's really compelling and really well done. The thing that really stands out to me, and this is not the first report to reach this conclusion, but again, it does it in a comprehensive way, is the arterial streets are a major, major problem. So one of my questions, and to Jack's point about how we can work together, is, I know maybe all of these streets are IDOT controlled, and there's a schedule for resurfacing and rebuilding those streets that is fairly set. So even if a local has interest in redesigning, making a street safer for everybody, there's limited opportunity to do that on the timeline that exists, right? So what I would love to see is how we can align that schedule with opportunities to identify funding and pursue implementation and sync those things up. Because if we have consensus that this is a problem that needs to be addressed, it needs to be incorporated into that project schedule. And we can't say, oh yeah, we should rebuild that street, but it's not going to be dealt with for 5 years, so forget it. And then 5 years from now, this is no longer top of mind. So I hope we can, leverage the urgency of these plans to commit to, an aggressive schedule for redesign.
Thank you, Kyle. We did find in every plan that arterial streets were usually where we're seeing the most serious and fatal injury crashes. A lot of times you have highway speeds, but you have many barriers or driveways or interactions with people walking and biking. And so we need to prioritize to make that immediate improvement, what kind of efforts we can implement on our arterial streets. And that will include working with our partners. And I don't know if IDOT wants to say anything to respond to Kyle.
We do look at every project, like you're saying, with safety. We do prioritize that. We do have a safety program that we do, when there are the fatal crashes or serious crashes, that we try and get out there. We are trying to implement smaller, things that are quicker, but, unfortunately, we do have to do all the engineering when they're a more serious thing, which does take a while, especially if you have to do it through phase 1, which we've been trying to streamline those as well, as try to get those done as fast as we can. So, but we do look at safety on all of our stuff. It's just, there is sometimes when it's engineering that it does take longer, and we are aware of those things.
And I do want to point out that IDOT has committed a lot of money to this Safe Travel for All program, and they are invested in improving these outcomes.
Absolutely. I do not mean to suggest that safety is not a priority for IDOT, or that you are not looking at this in every project you attack. I'm just saying I think that there's opportunities to sync up the recommendations here with the project schedule and, further emphasize the safety and the initiative that you're already taking on these projects.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor.
First of all, thank you. Excellent. But I guess my question, as you look at the crashes that are and fatal crashes, where does technology play, and have you looked at technology, especially with the new batteries that are going into the vehicles, the heavier weight of the vehicles? How does that play into it? Was that part of the study? And then also technology of the newer vehicles that are coming in with the lane assist and brake assist. And I know that, they have to put certain, paint and on the roads to keep them in the lanes. Has that been part of your study, and, how does that play into it?
So that's definitely a component of the safe system approach, mostly in that safer vehicle design. And that was less of a focus of these plans, but there is some mention of the importance of new technology in reducing serious and fatal injury crashes. I think we want to see where we can make more immediate changes first, but I think it's important to keep those opportunities in mind. And maybe that includes legislation And it's just hard to make a shift of the entire fleet that's on our roadways very quickly to have all the new technology.
And only reason I say that, I know that, just had an opportunity to go to Pace, and Pace are putting electric vehicles on the road also. So you got a heavier vehicle with a heavier battery that, to me, is gonna, when that accident occurs, could be more damaging. I just didn't know if that's, part of the research, or will be part of the research that go into this.
I think that's an important thing to consider as we move forward. And I think that would be something in Vicky's program area. And I see her nodding at me of safe systems.
Vehicle size, weight, and shape is an important part of the speed management work too. Understanding that the kinetic energy delivered by vehicles today is significantly higher than it was 20, 30 years ago. So all the more important to manage speeding. And some of that's addressed in the speed management report, and we will continue to implement that work as part of the safe system area.
All right, you got Tara, and then a couple more here. So Tara, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. In terms of the information presented, what I think is unique is the fact that this is a tool for everyone within our respective counties. And what we've seen for the first time, because a lot of those emphasis areas in the analysis of the crashes is not new to any of the implementers in this room. This is something based on the dynamics of our county and where these collisions occur that we're very familiar with. But what was interesting is to see it beyond our system, right, beyond our jurisdiction. What's unique about this plan is it paints the picture as a whole. And I think that with this milestone, it does compel all of us to work together to achieve these solutions, because that's the only way, in a collaborative way, that we can achieve the outcomes. So just kind of more of an observation, but we focused a lot on the crashes themselves or the nature, but in terms of the discussion, if we could pivot to the countermeasures, one of the questions that I have for you is about what are some of the commonalities in terms of the recommendations amongst each of the county plans? Are there areas where there's alignment? Because even when we're thinking of, for example, in Cook County, one of the proposed recommendations was automated enforcement. And so I'm curious, like, well, is this a recommendation in all the plans? Like, where do we have that common thread between the whole region? Can you expand on that?
Let's see. So I feel like the biggest commonality across all of them was speeding and the need to have an impact on reducing or getting to safer speeds. I think some of the countermeasures will vary. We saw, in McHenry, Will, and Kane, more use of roundabouts, which isn't maybe as something that would be as useful in Cook County, where it's very built out all the way and you don't have that room to do roundabouts. I think a lot of the countermeasures included improving visibility at intersections. So little things like those bump outs at intersections make the crosswalks shorter. That came across up in, I think, all of the plans. Vicky, do you have other?
Another theme was the safety of people who are walking and bicycling and protected infrastructure for those modes that seem to be resonate across all the plans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even in my 18 years of biking here in Chicago, I've seen so many new innovations on how we design our bike lanes and how we protect people from moving traffic. So I think there's an opportunity to do more of that. We're seeing it being done in the suburbs. There was a picture from Niles where they put the protected bike lane, just dropping in some curbs. That it's basically a pilot project and it can do a lot to protect people.
Thank you.
I think the one thing that everyone is astutely observing is that there could be common problems, but there might need to be aware of the context in which those problems are happening, and that the countermeasures need to just sort of recognize that between rural and urban, there's probably a different menu of options that make sense in those contexts. And so maybe that's something we should be aware of as we sort of progress into the countermeasure discussion.
Hey, thanks again for all of the work. It's huge. I think I didn't read all of the thousands of pages, but I did take a look at Cook counties in particular. And I recognize that not every plan can cover every sort of related aspect, right? But mode shift is sort of like out of scope of the plans, which is fine, right? You have to draw your scope somewhere. I know it's something that CMAP sees as important. And to your point, right, we have to figure out how to work together. That is on the transit side, that is the contribution we can make, right? So wondering sort of in the bigger picture of CMAP plans and policy, how you see mode shift sort of coming into play here.
That's absolutely an important part. And we have a new project in development called our Travel Choice Initiative. And that is really to look at how can we make different modes of transportation more more approachable, more common, and be something that someone thinks of when they want to go somewhere. What are the barriers to that? And I think that will play a huge role in improving safety, because if you get all these people out of their cars and into a bus, they're generally going to be safer. And I also wanted to acknowledge that I think I failed to mention how Cook County did work with the transit partners to make sure that there were those proven counter safety measures that work with bus and rail transit, because that's something that's very important here in the county. And I've even noticed the buses that talk to you, is if you get close, they're like, caution, bus approaching.
Okay, thanks.
Is it related? I think we had Hugo and PS Siraj, but is it related to?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just building off of Jen's comment, I think CDOT and CTA's Better Streets for Buses plan is really good, making clear that some of this bus infrastructure can be traffic calming infrastructure on these streets, right? So bus stop bump outs and things like that. So yeah, definitely want to leverage those opportunities.
Thank you, Kyle. Hugo.
Thank you, Lindsay, for all of the great work here. I would like to take the conversation back to automatic enforcement. I was wondering if there is any policy recommendations on how to use the revenue generated for that towards infrastructure to improve the conditions on the road. A lot of the time in areas where there is a lot of speeding is because the infrastructure is very poor and it's not the best, and kind of like incentivize people to go fast.
Yes, and I think that we found that in our, oh gosh, fines, fees, and fares research, that, you know, if we're doing heavy automated enforcement, some of the areas that have been neglected and don't have the traffic calming measures in place are areas that have been historically disinvested and might see more fines impacting maybe a lower income community. And so we have to really think carefully about how we're implementing that automated enforcement. And I think making sure that it is done in a fair way. And I think also what you're saying about where the revenue goes is really important for getting people on board. If you're saying, we don't want this revenue to, you know, fill our budget holes. We want this revenue. We don't want you to get these tickets. We want this money to save lives. So I think the more that we can show that this money is going to fix safety, I think would help this adoption process. And I believe that it's not fully allowed outside of Chicago. And I think that that is something that we'd be interested in studying and looking to push the regional level.
All right, thank you, Hugo. Real quick, a couple housekeeping things, just for the record. Tom Vanderwood with NERPC and PS Siraj with UIUC have joined the meeting. So UIC, I had it written down as been a long ride. No, I had it down as UIC. Sorry about that. I think PS, you had a question or a comment?
Shiraj, if you could approach the mic, thank you.
So I understand this is at the highest levels of planning at this point in time. I just want to make sure that you're also taking into cognizance that there are multimodality issues at play, in particular, grade crossings as a region that has the largest number of at-grade crossings in the country. Just wondering if there's been thought or efforts initiated towards addressing some of the issues, especially bike ped safety at grade crossings and also motorist safety.
Yes, that has been an important part. We have partnered with Metra, and so I'm wondering if David maybe asked you to say that, but the rail grade crossings is we did an analysis for each of the counties that have, as far as what types of crashes we're seeing, and Cook County does have the most fatalities in the nation for rail crossings. So we know that that is a very important part of our analysis.
It's also a self-serving purpose that question was aimed at, because we have the Rail Center of Excellence led by UIUC, of which UIC is also a part of. And one of the main goals of that Rail Center of Excellence is to improve safety. Yep. So at some point, it would be good to have that dialogue between CMAP and us.
Yeah, we did start the rail analysis, but I think there's a lot more work that can be done in the area of railway grade crossing prioritization and the countermeasures that we could implement. So that's an area we'd like to do more.
And if I can just add on, I do want to really applaud CMAP and the county's efforts in these plans. I know we worked with you a lot, and we're constant reminders in the team side to make sure that rail safety, particularly at rail highway grade crossings, was part of this. We know that there's still additional work to do, but we're pleased with the programmatic recommendations that have come in several of the plans, and that, and particularly in a lot of the emphasis in the Cook plan. And we're really looking forward to kind of the next level of analysis that I think we're all interested in doing beyond this. But this is a really good start, and really want to applaud the efforts that were made in this effort.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. I think Scott had a question or comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment, going back to something Kyle said earlier about the arterials that we have in our region. What was most alarming to me was looking at the data of roads and specifically intersections, arterial intersections that were improved 5 to 10 years ago, and still popped up as one of the worst from a safety perspective, still one of the worst intersections within our county. So it's not just a matter of more money towards safety or faster project delivery. It's kind of changing the practice of various highway departments on how we build these intersections, right? Especially the major arterials that carry a lot of traffic. So just something that was kind of surprising to me to see that we fully improve the intersection and yet still see issues with fatalities occurring.
Yeah, and Kevin with Lake County, if I could just piggyback on that, one thing that stood out too, and this kind of goes back to Kyle's comments, I think, on that, but I think it was DuPage's slide at the top with the big box you had around some of the bike ped stuff, and one of the biggest concerns that people had were not feeling safe biking and walking on a road. And I'm thinking to Lake County, we have some roads that were improved and have bike ped facilities. They're on-road facilities that were built maybe back in the 90s, but it's a higher speed road. So bike lanes on a road that's 50, 55 miles an hour. Now that was done because there was some historic, properties and things we couldn't touch, couldn't do a bike path. So we said, hey, something's better than nothing. But now seeing that and thinking about that, we already talked about going back to that road, and even prior to this meeting, and saying, hey, we got to find a way to get an off-road facility, because people aren't comfortable. How many people are actually using that facility? Because it's who's going to bring kids down a 50-mile-an-hour road, 55-mile-an-hour road. So it's, again, to Scott's point, and I think Kyle's comments before, is just a lot of this stuff was kind of, is there tweaks in the things? Are we really, how are we doing this? Are we making bike paths safe and comfortable, or are we just putting a bike path on a road or a sidewalk on a road, things like that? So, yes.
Just to echo what everyone else said, congratulations on getting to this point. Certainly the project team and the whole counties. We're really happy to be a partner in this with you, and look forward to moving this forward. To that point, and to the point made earlier, making sure that this plan is implemented. Part of the provisions of SS4A, I believe, and apologies if it was included in the presentation, was that there would be committees set up and annual reports and just ways for us to stay engaged with these results. Can you expand on those?
Yes, that's a very important point. CMAP will be hosting the websites where we can continue to monitor the progress of these plans. And we haven't fully decided if that will be the existing Engagement HQ websites that we have. It's most likely, but we do want to make sure that we are tracking the progress, and we also want to convene a regional safety group. We had one, the speed safety group, and I think we would pull some of the same partners and as well as our county partners to continue that effort. That's more of the next step, and we will definitely want to keep track of that and involve IDOT.
And just to, request when you get to that annual reporting time, if you could come back to this committee and kind of let us know, give a presentation, I think would be really helpful to keep us all engaged and know where we're going.
Great idea.
Yeah, I'll also add that this work is really going to inform our target setting process for the region as we move forward. We've talked about moving towards a regional target goal in the coming years, and the work and the monitoring of progress on these safety action plans will really inform those targets and our progress towards them.
Yeah, I think we had Mark and then Amy.
Oh, yeah. So that was actually going to ask, that answered my question about federal safety targets. So I'm all set. Thank you.
I just want to make a brief acknowledgement that our Lake County slides didn't quite make it into the presentation. So that was a mistake on our part. But Lindsay, I don't know if you want to give a little bit of airtime to whether there were similar things found in Lake County or if there were unique things going on. But I just want to note Lake is part of this this action.
I apologize. That would have been my fault, and I'm not sure why they didn't make it in there. And I'm actually going to see if John Wirtz, who is our consultant online, if he wanted to make any comments about Lake County and their findings, and he is recovering from ACL surgery yesterday. So
yeah, I think it went well. I'm trying to think what was unique about Lake County. I mean, I think it was a lot of the same types of issues. It's those higher speed arterials tended to be the problem areas. Lindsay mentioned roundabouts. I think that's one of the solutions. Access control on certain routes, bike ped facilities. Roadway departure crashes was one that was commonly overrepresented in severe and fatal crashes in all the counties, I guess, but maybe more so in the rural parts of Lake McHenry, places like that. I don't know. I can't think of anything else in particular that stood out in Lake County. It was, I would say something we also noticed was a lot of the high injury network was in sort of the, other than on those higher speed arterials, it was in the older parts of the county. So like, Joliet, Aurora, Waukegan, those types of cities that are sort of the historic center of each county. Had a pretty large proportion of the high injury network, probably a lot of bike ped crashes in those areas.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I just wanted to make a quick, before we get to the vote, just a quick acknowledgement. It was said already by a couple people up here, but thanks again to CMAP and Lindsay and the whole team and the leadership of CMAP and IDOT and all the counties. And I know a lot of people put time and effort. I can speak for Lake County, but it's everybody, right? Our staff that was putting time and effort, and the consultants that put time and effort in, but also this committee. I don't remember exactly when. It's been years that we kind of started talking about this, and it was a big deal. And we had a lot of good discussions here, which kind of led to this study, probably TTOC and other committees and stuff too here at CMAP. So it's been a very important topic to us, and this discussion has been great. And it's a good milestone, but I think someone alluded to it that, this is probably the work, maybe even in a lot of ways begins from now, right? Kind of looking at our systems and how can we now address the problems and stuff like that. So it's a great report and a lot of time and effort that went into it. So just want to acknowledge everyone for that. With that, we have a motion and a second. Get to the vote here. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Lindsay. All right, moving on to section 6, the informational items in the agenda. Item 6.01, after short update on the RTP process by Ryan. Julie will share some key findings from the existing conditions report, and we'll hear about the RCPs. Good morning, Ryan and Julie.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Tomto, Principal Policy Analyst here at CMAP. I use he, him pronouns. I have just some quick updates before I hand it over to Julie, who will walk us through a preview of the existing conditions report. I'll go through, if we go to the next slide, shows just kind of an overarching timeline of where we're at in the process right now. Pretty much every stream of work is underway. Starting with the regional capital projects update, the evaluation of candidate projects is underway. Really want to just take a moment to thank everybody, especially our implementing partners, for the time and effort that you put into submitting those projects. We know you all have a lot on your plates, and so we really appreciate you carving out some time to be able to work with us to submit those projects. We're still working to do a little bit of a quality control check. You'll see more details of the projects we've received so far in the agenda packet. But I just want to note that that is an evolving list. We're getting more updates. Since the agenda was published, we've received 6 additional projects, transit projects. And again, we're continuing to work on that quality control to update information. So we'll keep that updated. We're going to keep the document that's on the Engagement HQ site for the Regional Capital Projects Resource Group is where we're going to kind of keep it updated, but we will return to this committee in August with that updated list as well as we'll have the evaluation results at that point as well. I wanted to share a few highlights though real quick. Let's see. Our working list right now includes 117 projects. 60 of those are returning from the 2022 RSP list. 51 are new additions. Just again, a few highlights here. 10 of those new projects are lower cost arterial ad lanes that were not previously included in the definition and threshold. So when we made those definition updates, it resulted in 10 new projects, essentially. Also want to note that 8 are transit line extension projects that were submitted as kind of more of like that visionary concept project bucket. So they're on the list, but the idea is they're not really fully baked yet, but we wanted to have them out there for awareness and discussion. But likely those, we already know we're going to go, or the implementing agencies already want those to be on the unconstrained list, but is more meant to be for illustrative purposes to help shape the conversation of where we're headed. Also want to note that the current total cost of the projects that have been submitted at this point is right around approximately $72 billion. But this aligns pretty much with what we would expect. For the last update to ONTO 2050 in 2022, the total cost of RSPs were $72.7 billion. So we're right still in that same ballpark. Of the projects submitted to date, roadway projects make up about 60% of the total number of projects and about 84% of the anticipated costs. As in past cycles, state of good repair and modernization projects account for the vast majority of that, with interstate reconstructions making up about $27 billion worth of the amount. Of those arterial ad lanes that I mentioned that are new because of the definition update, it accounts for 28% of the number of projects, but represent just 6% of total costs. So over the next few months, CMAP will continue to coordinate with our partners to finalize that list and begin reviewing the evaluation results once they become available. Jen Miller will be reaching out to set up one-on-one meetings with each of our implementation partners to go over those projects, talk through the evaluation results, and then we will regroup with the resource group at our regularly scheduled August meeting. For the financial plan, work is steadily moving forward. Our next resource group meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 9th. And at that meeting, we'll be digging into revenue assumptions, baseline and enhancement costs, and we'll get the ball rolling on kind of outlining the risk assessment process that will take place later this fall. In terms of public outreach, the RTP questionnaire remains active, and we've had almost 1,000 responses so far. So thank you to everyone for helping get the word out on that. We'll continue to collect information or input through that questionnaire throughout the year to make sure we're hearing from people from across the region. Project staff have also been out and about across the region at various in-person, face-to-face events. In McHenry County, we had a booth at the Touch a Truck event. There we heard from parents sharing their daily challenges when it comes to getting around. We also heard from kids. It was kind of exciting to hear some of their innovative ideas. The top ideas or the consistent theme was that teleportation is really where we need to be headed. So maybe flag that for the emerging technology policy brief that we're working on. Other upcoming events that we have include the Romeoville Park Party, Chicago Sustainable Jobs Fair, and the LaGrange Farmers Market. Bunch more on the horizon, but those are upcoming ones. And as always, please, if you have community events or have any ideas for how we can connect with more residents in your communities, just let us know. We'd love to hear and figure out opportunities to connect. I can pause here if there's any questions on my update, but otherwise I'll hand it over to Julie.
Questions to start here? Other than I'm very excited to see how you weave teleportation into the recommendations, but.
Great, I'll hand it over to Julie.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Let me lower this a little bit. Can you hear me okay? All right, good morning. My name is Julie Reschke. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior policy analyst here at CMAP. The RTP will publish an existing conditions report in the coming days. So today I'd like to preview some details about the report, as well as a handful of high-level findings. You may remember that the RTP published the Emerging Priorities Report this past February, which outlined preliminary goals and objectives for our transportation system based on early research and stakeholder feedback. The upcoming conditions report helps us continue the conversation about these goal areas by identifying trends, challenges, and opportunities that can help inform how the region might strategize to implement our vision for transportation. As such, you'll eventually see that the report is structured by the 5 goal areas on the screen, providing key details about each. Next slide, please. So examining existing conditions is an inherent part of the long-range transportation planning process. Along with other resources like the socioeconomic forecast, policy briefs, and additional data analysis, this work helps us answer the question of what are the challenges and opportunities to achieve the region's vision for transportation. Information like this serves as an origin point for upcoming discussions about RTP strategies and policy development, which will happen in full force by this fall. A little bit about the report. The report will provide high-level data-informed takeaways about major topics that are affecting our regional transportation system. The exercise here was not to look at every possible data point that we could, but rather to provide a more clear, curated narrative about impactful dynamics and circumstances that we're seeing today. Since the existing conditions report will feature nearly 70 data visualizations like maps, charts, infographics, I will not be able to cover all of the content in the report during our meeting today. Instead, I'll walk through a handful of key takeaways that may be particularly informative for upcoming discussions about RTP strategies. So for our first one here, when we look at the age composition of the region's residents, we see that we have an aging population. This means that seniors over 65 represent a growing proportion of the total population, while children and working age adults are both decreasing. These changes align with CMAP's ongoing work on a regional socioeconomic forecast, signaling that these trends are likely to continue into the future. Changes in the age composition of the region can have big implications for transportation planning. For example, there may be shifts in where, when, and how residents need to travel through the region, and governments may need to consider more mobility options to support residents' ability to age in place.
Since 2010, there's been relatively stagnant population growth in the region. While the number of residents in the region has remained largely constant, we are seeing a growth in households. At the same time, households have become smaller, with a decreasing share of households with children. Growth in the number of households has been driven primarily by more people living alone, married couples without children, non-family arrangements like roommates or non-married couples, and family members living together. While these changes mirror national trends and are not unique to Northeastern Illinois, residents living in more smaller households could have an impact on the connections the transportation system needs to make. The most notable commute change that we see post-COVID is a growth in working remotely. On average, the number of residents working from home has tripled compared to pre-pandemic years. It appears, however, that this option is not uniformly available to all people. For example, we see higher earning households as well as white and Asian residents working remotely more often than the regional average. While these are definitely notable changes, we know that about 60% of jobs in the region cannot be done remotely. And so connecting residents to economic opportunity remains a priority. And so, for example, the commute downtown remains common, with the Loop being the densest job center in the region. And there are also several suburban job centers in municipalities like Oak Brook, Naperville, Schaumburg, Deerfield, and more. So some of these findings will overlap with what you just heard from Lindsay, but a concerning trend that we see is that crash fatalities have been trending upward since 2014. While serious injuries have declined since 2020, fatalities remain somewhat elevated, indicating that crashes may be becoming more deadly. Of these fatal and serious crashes, bicyclists and pedestrians are disproportionately impacted. And the data shows that bicyclists and pedestrians younger than 18 and older than 55 are overrepresented in these fatal and serious crashes. For residents who cannot or do not drive, forms of active transportation like walking and biking provide crucial connections to destinations and other modes like transit. Travelers that are not inside vehicles are particularly vulnerable to fatal and serious crashes. And we see that some areas of the region face higher rates of these crashes. Looking forward, efforts like the countywide safety action plans will help provide a greater understanding of local contexts and support the identification of stronger solutions. While the transportation sector is a large contributor to regional emissions, it is also affected by climate-related conditions. In particular, flooding is a challenge in Northeastern Illinois, and floods can weaken transportation infrastructure and cause barriers to mobility where they do happen. And unfortunately, a substantial share of transportation structures have high or very high flood risk. Extreme heat can also significantly affect residents traveling throughout the region, with transit riders at unsheltered stops and stations being particularly at risk for exposure to high temperatures. Effectively mitigating these risks will be crucial to maintain existing infrastructure and to continue providing essential transportation options. Next slide, please. Northeastern Illinois' regional economy has continued to grow in recent years. Between 2010 and 2023, the economy grew 71% and added 430,000 new jobs. While we're largely in line with peer metropolitan areas, our growth has been slower than some places like New York, Los Angeles, and the national average of 84%. If the region would like to see more economic growth, the data indicates that our transportation system could play a key role in making that happen. For example, the overwhelming majority of jobs are near major transportation assets. 52% of jobs are within 1 mile of an interstate, and 35% are walking distance from transit stations. Additionally, transportation, distribution, and logistics represent one of the strongest performing clusters in the regional economy. And job growth in the freight sector at 11% has outpaced overall job growth in the region at 7.8%. It's apparent that transportation is an economic strength in Northeastern Illinois, driving better outcomes for workers and businesses. And finally, my last high-level recap here. A large portion of the region's transportation infrastructure was built in the 1950s and 1960s. As these structures have continued to age, there's risk of them falling into poor condition without coordinated investment and strategic asset management approaches. Looking ahead, there are potential challenges to meet this moment. For example, tolled interstates rely on toll revenue, a strong funding source that helps these assets have lower average ages. In the broader transportation network, however, varying funding sources and investment cycles have created challenges to maintain critical assets. Additionally, some key revenue sources have weakened over time. For example, revenue from the motor fuel tax has decreased as fuel efficiency has increased and electric vehicles have become more common. The transportation infrastructure the region has is vast. Maintaining these essential connections will be critical to continue providing transportation options to residents and supporting the regional economy. All right, just to wrap up here, like I mentioned at the start of the presentation, those were just some high-level findings to give you a sense of the type of information that will be featured in the existing conditions report in greater depth. The full report will be published early next week and will be available at the RTP's engagement site, the link for which is on the screen there. Looking forward, the RTP will continue to provide information to support strategic conversations later this year. So over the next several months, we'll return with policy briefs, additional analysis, and insights from partners and community members. If we could take it to the next slide. I know many of you probably know where to reach me, but I did want to provide my contact information in case there's questions that come up after the report is published. But with that, I think if time allows, we could do questions or feedback.
And any questions, comments, feedback for Ryan or Julie? All right. None. Is that the end of it, or do you have another section? Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the updates. All right, moving on to item 6.02. Kasia is here to provide an update on legislative activities.
All right, good morning, everyone. You can hear me. It is May 30th. The General Assembly is scheduled to adjourn on May 31st. So I have most of my update really is focused on what is happening in the General Assembly. Please take it all with a grain of salt because a lot can change between now and tomorrow. So as you know, you're all aware, this week, 2 transit reform bills have been filed. Representative Delgado filed the bill in the House, Senator Billy Ballum in the Senate. These 2 bills, from the governance perspective, do largely parallel one another. Senator Billy Ballum's bill does include some additional revenue options. These include a regional real estate transfer tax, a 10% regional T&C fee, and a reallocation of the Collier County portion of the sales tax, and a toll surcharge, which is dedicated to a new transit supportive development fund. But focusing on the governance reforms included in these bills. So the bill creates a new Northern Illinois Transit Authority to oversee transit operations in Northeastern Illinois. CTA, Metra, and PACE remain independent entities, primarily tasked with operating a service. The new NETA board is comprised of 20 members with 5 appointments each from the governor's office, the city of Chicago, Cook County, and each of the Collier counties. The majority of these board members will also sit on the boards of the 3 service boards. There are 3 new advisory councils that are established, one for riders, one for ADA, and some new regional service councils. Just some of the new powers that this new regional agency would have include establishing regional service standards, coordinating a consolidated regional fare program, conducting regional strategic and capital planning. There are several new safety and security powers and requirements, including the creation of a law enforcement task force, as well as an Office of Transit Safety and Experience. There are some new TOD functions at this agency as well. And the bill also authorizes NETA to create a transit supportive development program. Fare box recovery ratio is reduced to 25% until 2029, at which point it drops to 20%. There are some proposed changes within IDOT as well, including the creation of a Transit Integration Policy Development Committee and Transit Coordination Oversight Officer. The bill also outlines a transition away from the current funding formulas with the service standards that I mentioned earlier, eventually driving funding allocation. There's about 1,600 pages of new legislative text that came out recently. So this is just very, high level takeaways. Not intended to be a comprehensive overview of what is included in these bills. Both bills had hearings yesterday. Amendments are expected from both chambers imminently. So we are continuing to monitor what unfolds in the next 36 hours or so. In addition to transit reform, of course, the legislature is also still working on an FY26 budget. So both the House and the Senate passed the shell bills that will serve as the vehicles for the budget language to move through the legislative process once that language is introduced. I think so that just keeping it high level because things are obviously very, very fluid right now. I'm so happy to take any questions or comments. But that concludes the legislative update.
Awesome. Thank you, Kasia. Kyle.
Yeah, just sharing some thoughts from RTA's perspective on the transit legislation that's been introduced. There's a lot to say about the reform, but we are largely leaving that to our appointing authorities, some of whom are at this table right now. But we're really focused on our feedback in terms of staff on the funding. And I think one thing that's important to point out with the revenue proposal that Kasia just talked through is much of that funding in the draft that was introduced yesterday is dedicated to capital and to a transit supportive development fund. So our analysis shows only 372 million of the supposed 1.2 billion would actually go to transit operations. So folks will recall that the fiscal cliff is 771. So, that proposal doesn't even get us to half of the fiscal cliff, and more than half of the funding in that proposal goes to capital and goes to TOD. And we are, of course, supportive of more transit-oriented development, and we do need more capital dollars long-term. But the crisis and the reason we're doing this right now is the fiscal cliff. And that proposal, as introduced, does not address the fiscal cliff. So if folks are interested in that analysis, I'm happy to share it. We know the revenue situation is fluid. So, there is time to fix this, which is why we're talking with legislators, which is why we're talking with partners and why we're talking here today. But our region's goal as set forth in part is to secure 1.5 billion. So I hope we can all work together over the next day or so to advocate as strongly as we can for as much revenue as possible going to operations to not only prevent cuts, but ultimately improve service all around the region.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments for Kasia? All right. Seeing none, thank you, Kasia. Appreciate the updates. All right, moving on to item 7, committee member updates. Do we have any updates from committee members today? All right, moving on to item 8, other business. Is there any other business that committee members like to bring forward? Seeing none, we're moving right along to public comments. Does anyone from the audience wish to address the committee today? And if you are online, please notify staff by using the raise the hand function. Have any comments? John Paul? Yeah, is this John Paul? I don't know if you can hear us or if you can talk.
Yes, good morning to everyone. It's
Good
John
morning.
Paul from Roger and Englewood, and I really appreciate the reports today, particularly as you look at the certification process for next year. I know this year we had a concern about the website, and it's already recognized that there's been some improvements. in the website, and your staff spoke about that. So because each day I go on the website and with these improvements, I can kind of rest assured that I can go on at least twice a week and find what I need to find as opposed to every day. And so that was some great improvements taking place. Also on the I was quite pleased to see that McHenry went back to, I think, in the safety report, 2 locations or 2 counties approved resolutions on the Vision Zero program. And I'm thinking one of the challenges that we have in Chicago is that just not clear if the city embraces it. And I think it would be reasonable request for the public for us to figure out ways in which the regional planning board can revisit maybe every 2 years or so a municipality or region's commitment to a Vision Zero. And I think those resolutions are very helpful to know where people stand, but also it's just good for us to kind of get reality checks about how much regions do care about the Vision Zero. So I think how we revisit that either annually or every 2 years may be a good thing for us to consider. That these resolutions, or at least them communicating that they still support it when they put all these applications in every year for different funding, that they support this. And so I just want to encourage that as part of a policy approach when you look at enforcing or encouraging that kind of collaboration in the region. All in all, just appreciate the reports today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John Paul. We appreciate the comments and have a good weekend. Anyone else online that would like to make a comment? Yeah, Garland. All right, Garland, I think you with us today. Can you hear us?
Yes. How you doing? It's Garland Armstrong, formerly of Elmwood Park and Des Plaines, now living in Des Moines. How's everyone in the Chicagoland area doing?
Hey, it's warming up, so we're doing pretty good, Garland. Good hearing
Yeah,
from you.
it's warming up here too, 80-something going on until Sunday. I just would like to comment especially on the sidewalks, especially when me and my wife used to live in Elmwood Park. Sometimes the sidewalks is like a little slanted up, and I think not only you mentioned it, but I think in Cook County, but I think it's all in the Chicagoland area, in the suburban areas. And I think you should check on some of the sidewalks where they're slant up and not flat down, because sometimes that could be a problem there. And then if anybody out there in those municipalities should definitely check and see about the sidewalks, especially if they're slightly up but not flat, especially if you're going to use mobility part of the sidewalk part. And then all of a sudden you're coming up to that, and then, like, for example, one time when I was pushing on the wheelchair, and I said, well, coming up to that part, I had to turn it around and then pull her backwards. And the same thing too for a power wheelchair. Now, I think y'all should be able to go back when you go back in your counties and in your communities. Make sure you check and see if there are any sidewalks that is slightly up but not completely flat, because that could be a problem there, especially for people with disabilities and seniors who have canes and walkers too. So I think you should definitely check on that real good and make sure have the data of it, and how y'all can make sure to come up with that hot issue on that, because God forbid if anybody will tip over and fail because the sidewalk is not flat, what can y'all do about it to make sure that the local governments will see firsthand, and what can they do about it? And even some of the state lawmakers needs to look at it firsthand in their communities, see what they can do about it. So if they need big assistance down the road with the federal coming in to see it, what all three can do about that, and the stakeholders do about it, because God forbid people will say the word lawsuits when something like this happening. We don't want to hear the word for lawsuits again. So I think y'all should definitely check into that issue. So we'll definitely, all the residents can say, finally, they've done something, and why it took so long over it. So that is my suggestion of it. And I'll be glad to answer any questions or comments concerning about that.
Thank you, Garland. No, that's a great comment. And I know, having smooth sidewalks is important, especially from the ADA perspective. So no, it's great comment and feedback, and we appreciate that.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Garland. You have a great weekend.
You too.
All right. I think that's all for the comments. Moving on to item 10. Next meeting we have is scheduled for August 1st of 2025. And with that, seeing no other business before the committee, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Amy, motion. Do I have a second? Jack? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Oops.
Just a quick announcement. Our MPO meeting is a posted start time of 11:30. So have half an hour to catch up on emails and phone calls, and then we'll get started at 11:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And the meeting is adjourned.